Today, we're gonna show you how to save money and get your car lowered. We got this Volkswagen Beam here. It's not adjustable. We're gonna weld some adjusters in it. Finally get my Volkswagen Bug sitting lower. So what we have here is a ball joint front beam. This would be a 67 to 77 Volkswagen Beetle. And then we've got some Welding adjusters. They make a couple different styles of these. I chose these because they're 20 bucks on eBay and they're a little bit easier to install. That's because you don't have to get the inner torsion pack support out by hitting a torch on these notches. Instead, we're actually gonna be cutting that whole section out and welding this adjuster in. So the first step in this is getting this beam cleaned up. It's got years of rust, paint, it's got about 2 tubes of grease inside of it. We got to get all this out so we can get a clean weld, and we're going to plan on powder coating this when we're done. So we're going to break out the pressure washer, and we're actually going to use the liquid media blaster. The pressure washer should do a great job of getting the grease out of these 2 tubes, and the liquid media blaster should clean this up nicely. Let's get into that, so that way we have a clean piece to work on. All right, this is about as clean as this is gonna get from just water. So now let's hook up the dustless media blaster to get the rust off this beam. This tool is great because you don't need a compressor to do media blasting, and it keeps the dust and mess down. To hook it up, you just stick the feed line into a bucket of media and attach the nozzle to the end of any standard pressure washer. You can double check it's working correctly by seeing the media flow through the hose. Well, we finished up blasting the beam and it came out great. The liquid media blaster really did a solid job. There's a couple areas that it wasn't quite able to get everything off, but overall it was quick and it was pretty clean. It wasn't as dusty and messy like a traditional blaster, and it got the job done. We then went ahead and we put it in the oven for a little bit just to try and bake it off. But as you can see, it already has surface rust on it. So to take care of this and to get the metal prepped and ready, we're gonna use some afterblast. Afterblast is kind of like fast etch, kind of like afterweld. Basically, it's a mild acid. It's gonna etch and then prevent any of this rust from coming back. So let's get spraying. So we're just gonna scuff this up, clean everything off. It's gonna leave us with a nice, clean bare metal finish. Where we got some deep pitting, we're gonna let it sit on there and soak in for a bit. It's gonna really ensure none of that ever comes back. One of the things with Afterblast, it also has a little bit of a cleaner in it, and that's what helps you get rid of some of that dirt and blast media that may still be on the surface. Now that we've had the Afterblast on there for a few minutes, all the flash rust is gone and we were able to get some good Afterblast into the pits that still existed. We're gonna grab some pre-painting prep and neutralize everything. You wanna spray this down while it's still wet and then wipe everything off. All right, so we're back for day 2. The goal today is to get these beam adjusters welded into this beam. We're gonna spend some time laying everything out, make sure we have them in the correct orientation. If we don't get this right, we could end up with a lifted bug instead of a lowered bug. Then we're actually gonna give this tubing cutter a shot. To get these cut, we're gonna do one at a time, so that way this doesn't move on us. We're gonna weld it up with the MIG 180, send it home. The first thing I'm doing is verifying that the OE grub screw is actually in the center of the beam. That way I land at the same overall width. Once I know that's center, and I also know the distance here, I then am going to be able to measure how wide those are, divide that by 2, and figure out my offset. So what I'm going to do, now that I know this is 2 inches wide, I know this thing's perfectly in the center, I'm going to come 1 inch over and 1 inch over. I'm going to make a little arc with my caliper. I'm going to use the top because I know that is in the center. and then where that arc is the greatest, that is actually my 1-inch offset. I'm doing that rather than trying to just freehand the straight line. This is kind of a measure 15 times and attempt to cut once. Satisfied with our measurements, we can move on to cutting the beam. Now you can use a bandsaw for this, but figuring out how to mount it for a perfect 90-degree cut, it can be a bit challenging. We actually opted to use the exhaust pipe roll cage cutter, and it worked really well for this application. Gave us 4 perfect cuts every time we needed it. To hold the suspension components in place, each of these tubes has bearings pressed into the end of them, and they need to come out. We use a long pipe and some elbow grease to beat them free. There we go, they're out. Now that the tubes are clear, we made a squeegee with the cheap microfiber towel in the end to get it all clean. For those of you who've played paintball, this is basically a barrel squeegee. With the inside of the tube perfectly clean, we can prep the outside for final fitment and welding. We use a grinder, file, and deburring tool until we have the perfect fit. So at this point, we've got the beam cleaned, blasted, cut, and now we can weld in the new adjusters. Now when you're welding tubing to other tubing, you need to make sure that you keep everything in plane and indexed correctly. To help us out with that, we create a little jig with 2 band clamps and some angle iron. With that lined up, we can weld this home. Now, instead of going through all that a second time, we're going to give you this real quick montage of us doing all those same steps again for the lower tube. Well, that wraps it up for day 2. We were able to get both of our adjusters welded in. We got them in the right spot. Pretty happy with how it all turned out. Now off camera, I'm going to fix some of this rot that we have over here. Get that fixed up, get this all cleaned up, ready for powder. And then when we come back, we're going to powder coat this. After a little more work cleaning this beam up, grinding the welds down, we're ready to get it coated. Now you could go a couple different routes here. You could paint it with chassis black, and that'd be quick and simple. It'd hold up all right. Going body color is another option if it's a show car. However, we're going to powder coat this. There's literally hundreds of color options available. It's super durable, so it's great for suspension components. And we have the new 100 kV powder coating gun that we're going to test out. Color-wise, it's pretty tough to go wrong with something like a wrinkle black or a silver vein. We wanted just a bit more pizzazz, so we actually mixed copper and silver vein together for our custom color. Clopper vein! Slipper vein! Something like that. We mix those 2 colors together. Looks pretty awesome. Let's coat this thing. We wipe it down with pre-painting prep, attach the ground, and we're on our way. We start with the tight corners, and then we move to the flatter portions of the beam. This 100 kV gun makes coating it real easy, especially with that light mounted right in the gun body. After we're finished coating, we throw it in the oven and check for flow out. This is when the powder starts to go from solid to liquid, normally about 5 minutes. We then bake for 20 minutes and pull it out for the final result. This thing came out great, and I can't wait to get it installed on the car. All of the care we took with cleaning, blasting, taking some time and fine-tuning the fitment of the adjusters, it all really paid off in the end. Well, now I'm off to install this in the Beetle. But in the meantime, if you want to tackle a project like this yourself, you can get all the tools you need over at Eastwood.com.